the lesson's chronological. We might not. But what's been brought up in this lesson is about your needs. Your needs. You know, what does God feel that you need to live on? And should you trust God that your needs will be met? Those kind of things. And right down to money. Talked about that money thing. So, okay, so before I read the text, well, no, I'll read Saturday, then I'm going to tell you a little story along this lines, because we got like 2 or 3 days in that lesson talking about what God, feels. He feels he's taking care of you. You'll hear it here in the when I read this, okay? The text is Psalms 50, 14 and 15. Offer to God thanksgiving and pay your vows to the Most High. Call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. Sometimes our world seems to be spinning out of control. Wars, bloodshed, crime, immorality, natural disasters, pandemics, economic uncertainty, political corruption, and more. There is strong urge for individuals and families to think first of their own survival. Accordingly, much thought is given to seeking security in these uncertain times, which of course is understandable. The toils of life do take a lot of our daily focus. With debts to pay, children to raise, property to maintain, it does take time and thought. And of course, we do need clothes, food, and shelter. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus addressed these very basic needs and then stated, this is what he stated in Matthew 6:32. Your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Amid trying times when we need to lean on the Lord more than ever, there are some concrete steps based on biblical principles that we should follow. So what's being addressed in this lesson is what God sees our needs are, and address the fact that do we fixate on what we need and forget that we should, as God said, or Jesus said on Sermon on the Mount, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. And all right, this thing's going to fall on me. This is my little story, okay? And it's about Christianity. It is about working of the same accord and really realizing what your needs are, and also not stepping on your neighbor's toes, because they have needs too. So if you heard what I said, this is what my story's about. But I'm going to start my story, and you're going to say, no, that has nothing to do with Christianity. This has nothing to do with not stepping on your neighbor's toes or your needs, but bear me out, okay? So this is about this lesson. I'm not going to go political today, but some words are political. Marxist, socialist, communist, okay? Those are forms of government, but you could see that everybody's kind of at the same level, all right? Well, I met my... Oh, what's that? Did I... excuse me. What I was going to say is that I met my first communist 3 years ago in the dentist office. Okay? She was 22 or 23 years old. And I was talking to her. She worked at the dentist office. She was helping the dentist, hand those little devices that hurt you. Okay, those kind of, So anyway, I got to talking to her, and she said she was off a farm in eastern South Dakota. And I asked questions about farming, and maybe I was being a little bit, sensitive questions, because, I don't ask people, like Elaine, are you gainfully employed? That's not right. But when you ask somebody farm question, well, what do you raise? What do you grow? She says, well, my parents are back there now. And she said, well, soybeans and corn. I said, what are you planting this year? Well, I don't know. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, these are sensitive questions, but this is more like, I'm not trying to figure out how much you make for money, but I'm trying to understand, if you say you're from a farm, well, how is it that you don't know what your parents are going to plant this year? And I said, do they just do alternate crops of corn and soybeans? Well, there's poultry too. And again, some of you just walked in here. I was telling, this is the first in the dentist's office. This young lady was the first communist I ever met, 23 years old. And she says this to me. She said, all right, but the reason I don't know what they're planting this summer, this spring, is because I live in a Hutterite colony. Now, for you that don't know what a Hutterite colony is, that's like Amish, Mennonite. Okay, are you familiar with the Hutterite colony? In those farming communities, I mean, they're cul-de-sacs with houses, and all the machinery's over here. Normally it's farming, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes they make trusses. I heard in eastern South Dakota, Menards buys trusses, from a Hutterite colony. Well, anyway, she said, yes, I grew up in a Hutterite colony. Now, this is back to Christianity, and trying to you see what what your needs are, but you don't step on your neighbor's toes as you try to acquire what you feel you need. This is where this is going. So I said, okay, that sounds, I'm from a farming background. I said, well, yeah, I've heard of that. I've never been to a Hutterite colony, but I said, it seems like there's a goal. Everybody works together and everybody pitches in. And then she laughed. Yeah. And there for a second, she gave me that look. Yeah, right. But that look that she gave me is why are you putting me on a box on a shelf? Why are you assuming that you or the rest of the world knows what goes on in Hutterite? Why do you, what do you call it? Well, you just think you know. And I go, wait a second, wait. Everybody works, don't they? She goes, everybody in the world, all the same. There are people that are lazy. They don't work. Says, you don't have to go to a Hutterite colony to say that everybody's pitching in. There are people that don't pull their weight. And she says, that's normal. She says, isn't it normal in your world? And I go, yeah, that's normal. People don't pitch, and I go, yeah, okay. And she says, it's no different. You'll find that anywhere. Here a 6 months ago, Elaine right here, and I remember what Elaine said, sometimes the job needs to get done. And sometimes you do more than that person next to you, but it has to get done. She said that. This young lady was telling me this story, but when you live in a Hutterite colony, there's a Christian basis there. I'm sure you work all week and then you go to church on Sunday, and I'm sure there's principles from the Bible that share and like, and work hard. I'm sure those Christian principles are preached. But yet she tells me sometimes people take advantage of the situation. And so to me, where does that go? Today they're talking about what our needs are and what God sees that our needs are. And the hated word of being selfish when, say for instance, I decide that I want to be prepared and I need enough resources, call it money, or I want my house paid for before I retire. Those are my objectives. Is that wrong? That's what's being approached in this. Oh, I think Thank you, James. I don't think I was getting too wild and crazy, but that's what's being talked about in this lesson is can you seek the kingdom of heaven without fixating on what you need to live on or what you need or your resources. So I'm going to pull up the lesson here and we're going to just look at Sundays. So if anybody came in late, it was not wrong of me to use the story about this young lady. I said communism, maybe socialism would have been the better word. But it's a very different lifestyle. That'd be very different to grow up like that. All right, on Sunday, 2 Chronicles 20, 1 through 22. This is what some of you come in a second. I said I'm going to read this because normally I don't. I end up talking too much, and you came for some lesson here. 2 Chronicles 20, 1 through 22. It came to pass after this also that the children of Moab and the children of Ammon, and with them other besides the Ammonites, came against Jehoshaphat to battle. Then there came some that told Jehoshaphat, saying, There cometh a great multitude against thee from beyond the sea on this side Syria, and behold, they be in Hazanai Tamar, which is in Gedadai. And Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord, and proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. And Judah gathered themselves together to ask help of the Lord. Even out of all the cities of Judah they came to seek the Lord. And Jehoshaphat stood in the congregation of Judah and Jerusalem in the house of the Lord before the new court, and said, O Lord God of our fathers, art not thou God in heaven, and rulest not thou over all the kingdoms of the heathen? And in thine hand is there not power and might, so that none is able to withstand thee? Art not thou our God, who didst drive out the inhabitants of this land before thy people Israel, and gavest it to the seed of Abraham thy friend forever? And they dwelt therein, and have built thee a sanctuary therein for thy name, saying, If when evil cometh upon us, as the sword, judgment, or pestilence, or famine, we stand before this house, and in thy presence, for thy name is in this house, and cry unto thee in our affliction, then thou wilt hear and help. And now, behold, the children of Ammon and Moab, and Mount Seir, whom thou wouldest not let Israel invade when they came out of the land of Egypt, but they turned from them and destroyed them not. Behold, I say, how they reward us. The one thing that I took from this today, guys, I know I'm droning on in the King James Version, but what I just read here is Jehoshaphat said, he's telling God, the people that are going to come, that want to start making war against us, when we first came here, God said didn't attack them, and look what they've done. We've been here, and they want to annihilate us. And we could have fixed this problem with, was it Joshua and the younger generation? And I thought that was interesting. Why, I'd have to go back and look at that. Why God decided these? He said right here, Ammon and Moab. We didn't touch them. You told us not to touch them, and look what they're doing to us. So that's in verse 10. Behold, I say, how they reward us, to come to cast us out of thy possession, which thou hast given us to inherit. Verse 12, O our God, wilt thou not judge them? For we have no might against this great company that cometh against us. Neither know we what to do, but our eyes are upon thee. And all Judah stood before the Lord with their little ones, their wives, and their children. Then upon Jehazazel, the son of Zechariah, the son of Benaiah, the son of Jeiel, the son of Mattaniah, a Levite of the sons of Asaph, came the Spirit of the Lord in the midst of the congregation. See, this is the prophet guy. Then upon this is the guy that's going to speak. So Jehoshaphat's not the only one here speaking the truth. This is this guy. Spirit of the Lord came upon him. And he said, Hearken ye, all Judah, and ye inhabitants of Jerusalem, and thou King Jehoshaphat, thus saith the Lord unto you, Be not afraid nor dismayed by reason of this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Tomorrow go ye down against them. Behold, they come up by the cliff of Ziz, and ye shall find them at the end of the brook, before the wilderness of Jeruel. Ye shall not need to fight in this battle. Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you. O Judah and Jerusalem, fear not, nor be dismayed. Tomorrow go out against them, for the Lord will be with you. This was an interesting part of this story, because I'm not that well versed. But I remember when Gideon did his thing, and a lot of those other guys did their thing. But this guy, he just comes out of the midst of the multitude and said, he basically asked the king, Here, King Joseph, I need to tell you something. Interesting guy. I'm not even saying his name right, probably, but I was reading the lesson. They said the prophet said this or that, made Israel feel better about this. And I was like, what are you talking about? What prophet? The king. Well, Jehoshaphat wasn't the one. There was this guy. He's the one that spoke up and told him, don't be afraid. It'll be all right. I think I'm in 18. And Jehoshaphat bowed his head with his face to the ground, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem fell before the Lord, worshiping the Lord. And the Levites of the children of Kohathites and the children of the Korites stood up to praise the Lord God of Israel with a loud voice on high. Verse 20, and they rose early in the morning and went forth into the wilderness of Tekoa. And as they went forth, Jehoshaphat stood and said, hear me, O Judah, and ye inhabitants of Jerusalem. Believe in the Lord your God, so shall ye be established. Believe his prophets. See, when Jehoshaphat said, believe his prophets, he was talking about the guy that stood up the day before. So shall ye prosper. And when he had consulted with the people, he appointed singers unto the Lord, and that should praise the beauty of holiness as they went out before the army, and to say, praise the Lord, for his mercy endureth forever. And when they began to sing and to praise, the Lord set ambushes against the children of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, which were come against Judah, and they were smitten. So I'm ended in verse 22. Let me go ahead and continue with what the author of our lesson. If I read in between on Sunday there, pretty much I read the story, okay? At the bottom of Sundays, the one question they ask is 2 Chronicles 20:20. All right, I got it right here. And the question, what special significance should this text have for Seventh-day Adventists? I'm going to read it again. And they rose early in the morning and went forth into the wilderness of Tekoa. And as they went forth, Jehoshaphat stood and said, hear me, O Judah, and ye inhabitants of Jerusalem. Believe in the Lord your God, so shall ye be established. Believe his prophets, so shall ye prosper. So, that's my question this morning. Not mine, it comes from the lesson. I read the story. And James, if you turn my mic on, this one, before I even move around, what does that text could mean to Seventh-day Adventists? Sure. Here, you're going to talk into this for the sake of our online. Here. Yeah.
Yes. We are to believe God, trust in him, and you notice that Jehoshaphat prayed first. If he hadn't prayed and asked God for help, I don't think they would have gotten it. But the tribe of Ammon and Moab were actually they were Israelites.
Okay.
But they were breaking the law, and at first God didn't let them go through, and kill them. They left them alone. They went around them. But now they have used up their cup, and God was ready to break them down. But as far as us, we are to believe in God and trust in him, pray about these things, anything, and also trust in his prophet. We need to be reading Ellen White. We are really blessed.
Okay. I was looking at the word, I read it, and it's King James, and you will prosper. I don't think that the question was asked with regard to Seventh-day Adventists, how do we look at this verse, but I think it responds to anybody that's Christian. But where's the prosper going to show up at? So, what's your thoughts on that? Okay, I'll answer in the front. You not want for anything? Definition, prosper. Okay. Do you guys? Oh, sure. Yes. And please use the mic. I'm only a second away. Yes.
Will prosper in bringing others to Christ.
Oh.
And sharing the truth.
Okay. I see what you're saying is that the work's going to get done. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Sometimes it's not always about him. If my needs being felt, the house is warm and a roof over my head. But the thing is yeah. But what else are you going to get done today? Yeah. Okay. That was a good answer. Everything's a good answer, but I'm just saying I never thought of it that way. Do you remember investment? Do you remember in where you would decide to? Well, it's entrepreneurship kind of thing where it's selling stuff. I mean, it come down to money, and I've always. Okay, here's a good one. I read this little book. It was kind of about investment, but it was a broader example. You ever drive down the road and you used to see those? You always come up behind those cement trucks and it says McNeilius on them. McNeilius. Well, I came across some little book, and I was probably in the foyer of a church. It was kind of a little buried in the dust, and looking at it, it wasn't from the 70s. It was probably from the 90s. But time's gone by. But I read this little book about this guy named McNeilius. He was Seventh-day Adventist, and he built those cement trucks. And it says McNeilius. He sold the franchise after so many years, but the book talked about. The quick of it is business was good. And he decided that him and his family, the guy that wrote the book was a McNeilius, had decided that they would come up with an equation, systematic given, and say, yeah, well, we're going to do this. If we reach this, if we make it here, we'll give this. You understand the book, kind of, and that it doesn't matter if you're selling cement trucks or you're selling a lemonade stand on a corner or something at 5 cents a cup. Doesn't matter. But it comes back to prosper, okay? A different kind of prosper, because what was said earlier counts for prosper. What was said is, how did you say it? Your needs will be met? Or, yeah. But reading that book, it made me think. I don't have a manufacturing facility. I don't, my business is not like that, but it made me wonder, can God be a business partner? So anyway, it should be. So the word prosper, I hope you know I'm still in the question here, unless anybody else has something to say right now. I moved it. What do you feel you're going to prosper? Do you feel you're going to prosper by coming to this church, listening to some schmo like me this morning, or better people that come afterwards? Are you going to prosper because, not necessarily because of the church, but are you going to learn something from the Bible, being a Christian, or is it going to show up? Is it going to show up in your bank account? Is it going to show up as stability? Is it going to show up as psychologically that you're at peace? The answer is no. Okay, it's for the money, wealth, and to do money. Okay. Okay, so you can be just as poor, just as unhealthy, but you can be just as close to God. Okay, so again, you're saying you're prospering. God, okay. Yep. Yes, I see what's them say? You're not going to be wealthy. But the prosper part, though, I do agree that regardless of where you're at on the wealth scale, the one thing's for sure is that you can have peace of mind when you go to bed at night. Yeah. So that statement that I'm not doing a whole lot of money stuff today, but when we move into the next one, there's some money stuff, okay? But how do you deal with my needs being met if I do have a yearning to have more, so to speak? Have you ever heard that one? It didn't come from the Bible, but it said that these are all little quips that have to do with wealth and how you handle your yearnings to have more. This one was said, you can only eat so much, and you can only sleep in one bed at a time. Okay? And you're wondering, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you have, that you can buy fancy food, you can only eat so much. And it doesn't matter how many houses you have, you can only sleep in one bed at a time. Okay? That doesn't mean that you still don't want to strive to do stuff. It doesn't, but it puts things in a context. Do I feel envious that I need more? Well, that's this what I just told you. You know, a person has to come to terms with that. You really do. Back to wealth, and I think it was Bill Gates. It wasn't Warren Buffett, but it was Bill Gates said that the common American eats like a king compared to King Arthur's court. Says the common American can go down to Walmart and buy the bounty for his table that the most majestic king thought he was going to put on his table. And I think about those things, putting in context. Do I eat as good as some king from 1100, in England somewhere? No, I thought about that. Do I eat better than a king? And I know that today, the Sabbath school lesson, we're talking about wealth, but still, you do have to think about those things. Is life good for me? What's my benchmark? What am I comparing it to? And so I just provided that to you because it does make you think. It does. So I do. I eat better than a king. Without getting into, I go to Walmart. I can buy stuff that's being shipped in from Chile. I'm sure those raspberries I ate this morning that was offered, they came from Chile. They're not growing them this time of year in South Dakota or Florida. So, okay, well, the next 1 Chronicles 21, 1 through 14. This is about King David. So bear with me. Let's do this. Hopefully I don't read too fast. If you have Bibles, you can look. And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. It starts out right there. You get it? And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. And you're wondering, what are you talking? Satan's tempting him? What's Satan doing to make David start counting? See, I never heard this story until this came up. This story meant nothing to me. And David said to Joab and to the rulers of the people, "Go number Israel from Beersheba even to Dan, and bring the number of them to me that I may know it." And Joab answered, this is a good story, guys. Joab is his number one in command, isn't he? He's the guy that's in charge of the army. And Joab answered, "The Lord make his people 100 times so many more as they be. But my lord the king, are they not all my lord's servants? Why then doth my lord require these things? Why will he be a cause of trespass to Israel?" So Joab's, I read a different version last night. A different version of the Bible was saying Joab's telling him, it doesn't matter what the numbers are, when the time comes, you'll have enough. Nevertheless, the king's word prevailed against Joab. Wherefore Joab departed and went throughout all Israel and came to Jerusalem. And Joab gave the sum of the number of the people unto David. And all they of Israel were 1,000 and 100,000 men, and drew sword. And Judah was 410,000 men, and they drew sword. But Levi and Benjamin counted he not among them, for the king's word was abominable to Joab. And God was displeased with this thing. Therefore he smote Israel. And David said unto God, I have sinned greatly because I have done these things, but now I beseech thee, do away the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. And the Lord spake unto Gad, David's seer, saying, Go and tell David, saying, Thus saith the Lord, I offer thee three things. Choose thee one of them, that I may do it unto thee. Verse 11. So Gad came to David and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, choose thee, either 3 years famine or 3 months to be destroyed before thy foes, while that the sword of thine enemies overtaketh thee, or else 3 days the sword of the Lord, even the pestilence in the land, and the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the coast of Israel. Now therefore advise myself that of what word I shall bring against him that sent me. And David said unto Gad, I am in a great strait. Let me fall now into the hand of the Lord, for very great are his mercies, but let me not fall into the hand of man. So the Lord sent pestilence upon Israel, and there fell of Israel 70,000 men. That's the end in 14. Back to what's commented. Again, anybody, if you're looking, David is great. He started counting. He was ready, and he needed to know that he had enough horses. And Joab told him, listen, we've done this before. Why are you counting? All right. I read I hope you guys know that this effort this morning, my goal is to read these Bible texts, which I did. So you got the story. I go to the lesson. They present the questions. I might digress a little bit, but here's the question at the bottom. Before I read this question, I'm just going to say it's always about the numbers. And that's what David was doing. But Joab told him it's not always about the numbers. And so, but it was about the numbers. And David wasn't counting money. He was counting men. But he's, it's math. It's an equation. Where do we sit? Where do we sit? Are we going to be able to take on what's going to be coming at us? Well, let's get a good count. Well, here's the question at the bottom. How do we strike the right balance between doing what we can, for instance, to be financially secure, and yet at the same time trusting in the Lord for all things? Now, that's the question from the lesson. So letting you know, I'm not steering this towards money. To be fair, you looked at the lesson. That's the question. It's a question from the lesson. So I'm going to read it again. How do we strike the right balance between doing what we can, for instance, to be financially secure, and yet at the same time trusting in the Lord for all things? Well, I'm going to print one or two little stories, and then you guys are going to have to tell me how you find the balance between that money, that dollar, and, like I said before, knowing when enough is enough, not stepping on the next person's toes, because of, your pursuit. There's got to be some kind of balance. To each, everybody's going to be different. I told you earlier about this guy that had a manufacturing facility that built cement trucks. He had a passion for building cement trucks. But you got to sell them too. So you can't just keep making them, you got to sell them. So sometimes your pursuit in life is your job, and is it always about the money? Or is it because that's your work and that's what you do? But it comes back to, well, what about your house? Do you have enough? Are you ready? Well, okay, what's that, again, that balance? Here's a story I have for you that I'll tell one right now. I had an accident one time where I tipped a truck over. I had insurance. It was a semi-truck, okay? And my deductible was $1,000 or whatever. Maybe it was $2,000. But I caused a lot of damage when that thing went over. And I was sliding on the ground on my side up in North Dakota about midnight. And a wind storm hit some ice. Sad thing is I went through at 11 o'clock, came back through the same place 4 hours later, but one of those little ice storms came through. And the thing is it just wasn't like a 6-mile stretch. Ever seen those fence posts that have all that ice on one side? That wasn't there at 11 o'clock, but at 2 o'clock it was there. Caused that damage. Anyway, I was hauling cattle. It was a cattle pot. Some died. A lot lived. Some died. Bad thing. had insurance, though. Truck's out of commission. There's other things that, play into, all right, what are we going to do? How do you rebuild those things? This is what somebody told me. So you wonder, what's this have to do with the money issue? This is what somebody told me. They said, if all it takes is money to solve your problems, you're a very lucky man. And you have to think about that. So it puts in context the whole money situation, or what I just read the question from the lesson. So you can use the question from the lesson, or you can talk into this, and maybe it's unfair for me to present that, that statement. If all it takes is money to solve your problems, you're a very lucky man. So, to me, made me think, well, how much money do you need? Well, you might always need money. But are you a lucky man? Okay, so, please, I'm this kind of come on late, but what was said is that when he started counting, that wasn't just trying to reassure the people that, okay, this is where we're at, guys. What was been said is that he was going into this, that I've built this army we can annihilate. Watch what we can do. Okay, yeah. Was there anybody else? Sometimes I look over here or there. Anybody else? Hey, it's working. So I hope, there was here 6 months ago, I ran around, made everybody hold this, and it wasn't. I apologize. But anybody else this morning want to deal with the money thing? I presented it, okay, here and then here. Really. Go, because first? Okay. Because I'm going to put you on the spot. I really want to know how to deal with the money thing and know how to find that balance. So if it's similar, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, I was a instructor a long time ago at an Army school, and we had a soda fund. And the guys got tired of losing money because they could never keep enough soda in the fridge. So the guy looked at me and says, "You're taking it." And I said, "Fine, I'll take it, but I'll tell you right away, all the profits, all the money that come off it, right off the top, I'm going to pay a tithe and an offering out of it, and then I'll buy the sodas." And I did that for about 2 years, and by the time I left, and I never worried about buying the sodas or anything like that, by the time I left, I had cases of soda stacked up beside the fridge full, the cash box full, and I took the cash out that was extra, and I did, and I kept that. And I never counted it, never worried about it, but I never did not pay a tithe or an offering on it. And they had so much soda, and they had money for their parties, because they'd buy hot dogs and do stuff every year and everything. When I left, the guy said, "How'd you do that?" And it was a trust thing. You put your quarters in a can, and you got your sodas out. No one ever questioned it. But they had so much soda and cash in the box. When I left, they wondered, what were you doing? And I said, I didn't do anything special. I didn't worry about nothing. I did exactly what I told you I was going to do. And he was totally amazed.
So did you say some of that money you did give, or you didn't? I didn't understand that.
No, I paid my tithe and offering.
You did, yeah, okay.
Right off the top, before anything. I bought the sodas. I left change and cash in the box. And what was, left over, I kept. So I did make money off of the soda fund. I never was short on sodas. It was growing like you wouldn't believe.
Yes.
They were getting their company parties out of it for our little section. And they had more money than they knew what to do with in that cash box when I left. So, we can't worry about the money thing if we believe and we're honest and we do what Malachi told us to do. Tithes and offerings and monies, and those things will come by.
Okay. Yeah. Lane?
I want to read this last paragraph on Monday's lesson. We should be using our present time to get square with God, get out of debt, and be generous with what we have been given. In the word of the well-known Thomas Dorsey's gospel song, if we ever needed the Lord before, we sure do need him now. And that is the problem the problem that we have is what we have, we want more of. And the Lord didn't promise us wealth. He promised that he would make things sure of our needs, not of our wants. And people think what they want is what they need, but that isn't what the Lord told them.
Okay. You know, when we today, you know, we approach the subject, the money thing, and it is in the question I just asked, and it's say if you got kids and you try to instill in them a work ethic, and you try to tell them to manage their money, but you don't want to turn them into greedy little, you know what I'm saying? So this subject we're talking about today, you think to yourself, well, yeah, Kibben, you know, by the time you're 50, going on, looking at retirement, you kind of a scope of where you're at. Maybe your family along the way needed a loan or whatever, and you help somebody. So you might at this point got this figured out. Might have. But when you're talking today, what we're talking about, there's no young people in here. And when you try to instill in them a work ethic and save your money or whatever, and you point over at somebody and you reference the grasshopper that didn't work. You remember that fable? He didn't work. And who worked all summer? The ants? Yeah, okay, you use that. You look over and say, and you're not being mean, but you're saying, grasshopper. And you're trying to treat the kids saying, yeah, I don't want to live that way. But you don't want to turn your kids into, what's the right, misers, greed. Do you see that? It's a hard balance. It's hard. It's really hard to talk about those things. You know, right now, you know, the church building everything and trying to, you know, to make that jump, and there's going to be a little more money to make that thing work to pay off that note and that loan. Well, yeah, we talk about that in here, and that's a hard go. But when you're talking about this whole money thing and everything, it's very real. When you instill in somebody, young people, you don't want to turn them into misers. You don't want to turn them in. You want them to be happy with their job. Tell them, well, you don't have to make a fortune. If you like your job, and you like going to do it, then maybe that does your needs. So, yeah, what we're talking about today is very real, because it's just a hard thing to talk about. I use the word grasshopper. That's the nicest way to say it, because you look over, and I would like to be prepared, and you look over, and maybe the next person decides, well, no, I'm not going to. Things will work out, and it does. But everybody's at a different level. So, but you don't want somebody, that money. You don't want it to rule your life. You don't, and that's a hard thing to do. Guys, I'm going to tell one last story about the money thing, and it's going to end. All right, and you can think about this. Maybe I'll even let you answer a question. But I'm trying to talk about these are little stories that I tell my kids or something, trying to find that balance. Here we go. This is 23 years ago. I was working a construction job up around Spearfish. Went out to this house site, and one building had already been built. A man and his father had come from Cincinnati, Ohio, and they'd been there the year before and built this structure. Actually, on the way home, anybody drives back to Gillette or whatever, before you get to Sundance, it's Mosque Road. That's where it was on. Anyway, out to this building. They had an affection for those buildings like you see in those Westerns, where you have that kind of what do you call it, where you step up on the deck and you have that high front, and it could say hotel or something, but yet there's nothing behind it. But it was a building, but it was an affection for that kind of Western motif look from something from Bonanza or Gunsmoke, in a town. That whole anyway, so they were a facade. Yes, and facade. And so anyway, they wanted to build on. I met this gentleman back then. He was in his 80s, and the other man was probably in his 50s. And this man was from Cincinnati, Ohio. They had a dirt moving business, excavation, and they had bulldozers and skid steers and backhoes and excavators. And anyway, as the younger gentleman was talking about the people I was working for, how they were going to build this building, this gentleman was talking to me, the older gentleman. He's, like he said, he's 80, and he said, yeah, I'm from Italy. And he said, back in World War II, I was a very young man, but he said, I was a teenager, and when Italy decided that we were beat, we told the Americans, all right, we're done. Well, the Germans were still in our country, and they looked over and said, we're not done. So they loaded up a bunch of us and took us back up to Germany, and we had to work in their factories. And he said, I worked hard. It was kind of a prison, but he said, I only did that for, I don't know, he said 8-9 months. And then he said, yeah, they let us go. The end of the war was there. He said, it was kind of a hard time. He said, and I decided to come to America. And he said, I started my business. I worked hard. And he said, here's a side note for you. He said, he used the word your, I couldn't tell an accent, but he said, your Deadwood? He said, I've been up to your Deadwood. I've walked those streets. And he said, I've looked at those buildings. And he said, I'm going to tell you right now, he said, there was no Americans that built that. Those were Italians and Poles. He said, I walked to those stones, and he says, I see them. He said, I know. He said, I know, I worked that. He said, I know how they build those blocks of masonry. He said, I know that. He said, I looked at that. He said this, back to the money thing here. He said, back where I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, the young guys that work for me, they come up to me and they say, hey, I wished I had your money. He said, a young man comes, I wished I had your money. And he said, I look at him and I tell him this. He said, all right. He said, this is what the deal would be. He said, I would give you everything I have. He said, if I could, in turn, you could give me your youth. And you can be the old man with the money. And he said, I'll take your youth any day with nothing. All right. We have just 2 or 3 minutes left. That's something to think about. It may not answer the whole money question, but there's something in there. That's all he said to me. I didn't know if he meant, well, he could do it over, then he'd make more money? He'd do all the right thing? I don't know. That's all he said. End of story. So any thoughts, was there anything to glean from that statement that could be any truth about the money thing? Any statements here? We got 3 minutes. I'll take a answer from the crowd. That was my little story. It was this gentleman saying this. I've never heard that before. Any thoughts? One thought, please, and you're going to end this? It's working. Here you go.
Well, I think at that stage of life, you learned a lot of lessons, whether it was wealth or health, serving God, whatever it was his particular point, you've gained a lot of wisdom by that point. So if you could trade your wealth for wisdom and start over, there's a lot of things that make you wealthy, like serving God, bringing others to Christ, your own wealth, well, whatever it be, that wisdom that you have at that age that we didn't have at 20, that's worth a lot.
Worth a lot? Okay. Well, I'm going to end that. I know we're probably stopping 2 minutes earlier. Hopefully my stories didn't bore you. I gave you, these were not mine. These are people I met, different ones that I haven't read in Reader's Digest or heard from sermons up front. But that whole balance thing about whether or not your needs are going to be met or what you feel you're striving for, to the point that you fixate on those things, and all of a sudden, the point that all of a sudden that's all that you care about, and then that's wrong. I mean, I just described it there. But when you start fixating on those things, then you don't care about the person next to you, and you'll start losing friends along the way, or you'll start losing family along the way. I mean, you'll see those results fast. Well, guys, you want to say a prayer with me, and we'll end the lesson. Dear Jesus, thank you for the people that could come this morning. Thank you for the nice weather that's coming. And please go with us today. Amen.